So think about this for a second. What happens if you give a hacker infinite time, completely tax-free funding, and highly sophisticated artificial intelligence?
Well, it turns out the best way to defend against that kind of threat is to just assume they've already won.
Right. And welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping into some incredible source material today. It's an interview with Chavi Gracia.
Yeah, he's the cybersecurity partner at Deloitte Spain. And this interview is basically a preview of the major themes for the CyberIcon 2026 event.
Which is happening in Madrid on January 27th, 2026, for those of you keeping track.
Exactly. And the notes from this interview, they give us this really stark look into the future of global digital defense.
Yeah, the mission for our deep dive today is to explore how the baseline rules of cybersecurity are just fundamentally changing. We're talking about shifting away from basic defense to this new concept of cyber resilience.
We'll also be unpacking the massive and frankly kind of scary leap from generative AI to agentic AI.
Oh, yeah. And we're going to examine how new European regulations are actually being weaponized, like in a good way, by smart companies to drive business growth.
Which is a huge shift in mindset.
Right.
Because to understand how businesses are fighting back against these AI-powered threats, we really have to look at how their whole baseline philosophy has completely inverted.
Right, because for decades, the entire idea of cybersecurity was basically just building a perimeter. The whole goal was simply to keep the bad guys out.
Exactly. But the new baseline assumption, and this is for every board of directors and every C-suite executive out there today, is that the breach has already happened. The adversary is already inside the house.
It makes me think of like a medieval castle, right? You build this massive stone wall, maybe dig a moat, put all your guards on the perimeter.
Classic defense.
Yeah, but if an enemy manages to scale that wall or, someone accidentally just leaves the front gate open, the whole castle falls. The entire internal system is totally compromised.
Which is why the new resilience model is entirely different. It functions a lot more like a modern submarine built with watertight compartments.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, so if the hull gets breached and one section floods, you immediately seal off those heavy steel doors.
Right, you lose that specific compartment, but the ship itself survives, it maintains its pressure, and you just keep moving forward.
Exactly. But the thing is, building those digital watertight compartments requires a complete organizational teardown.
Wow, really? A complete teardown?
Yeah, because you can no longer have a standalone cybersecurity team operating in like an isolated silo. You can't just run checks after the engineering team has already built a product.
Slapping a Band-Aid on it at the end.
Right. Security has to be embedded directly into everyday operational IT systems right from the inception. We're talking about baking it into the core code of your ERP and your CRM.
Which is wild because historically, nobody really talked about cyber incidents inside an ERP. It was viewed purely as an internal operational tool for, finance and supply chain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But as these massive systems migrate to the cloud, the way they're configured requires security protocols to be inherent in the architecture itself.
It demands a massive culture shift, really. Every single IT deployment basically has to be treated inherently as a security deployment.
That's spot on.
So let's follow that thread a bit, because if we are assuming the submarine hull is, constantly being breached, we need to understand what exactly is tearing through the metal so efficiently.
Right. And the notes point directly to the rapid evolution of artificial intelligence on the offensive side.
It's an incredibly asymmetric battlefield right now. Attackers operate with zero regulation. They don't have quarterly earnings reports to worry about.
They have vast financial resources.
Yeah, and their efficiency has just absolutely skyrocketed. Chavi Gracia highlights a terrifying metric in the interview. A system vulnerability that used to take an attacker a full day to exploit now takes just a single hour.
Just 1 hour. And that shrinking window is fundamentally changing defense architecture. When the exploit cycle drops from 24 hours down to 60 minutes,
human reaction time is just gone.
It's rendered almost completely irrelevant. An attacker is using AI to automate the entire reconnaissance phase of their operation.
So they scan a network, identify an unpatched server, and deploy the exploit payload.
Before a human analyst has even finished their morning coffee. It's that fast.
That is insane. And we're not talking about those old basic phishing emails with poor grammar and weird formatting anymore, are we?
Oh, no, those are relics. Today, attackers are deploying highly sophisticated voice and image spoofing. They correlate real-time open-source intelligence to just completely bypass basic human skepticism.
Like, an employee doesn't just get a generic email, they get a deepfake voice memo from their actual CFO.
Exactly. And that fake memo might reference a project that was just mentioned on a public earnings call 10 minutes prior.
Oh, wow. So I see why human reaction times are relevant. You are literally forced to fight AI with AI.
You have to. But the notes make a very sharp distinction here. The industry isn't just relying on basic automation anymore.
Right, because Deloitte's Level 1 Security Operations Center, or SOC, was already 45% automated before the massive boom in generative AI.
Yeah, they had squeezed almost all the efficiency they could out of standard scripts.
Hmm.
The new frontier they're moving into is agentic AI.
Okay, so talk to me about that leap. What is the leap from generative to agentic AI?
It is the defining shift in modern defense. Look, generative AI can write you a beautiful incident report or summarize a thread feed. Basic automation can follow a pre-written playbook.
Like if it sees a known malware signature, it just blocks the IP address.
Exactly. But agentic AI involves software agents making active contextual decisions in completely novel situations.
Wow. So they aren't just executing static scripts.
No, they are functioning as SOC managers. They analyze anomalies that have no known signature, and they decide on the best course of action to proactively isolate an attack without bringing down the entire network.
And a generic AI agent off the shelf just can't do that. It really needs to know the specific business environment it's protecting.
Context is everything. An AI agent needs to intimately understand the specific industrial context it's operating in.
Like the digital language and protocols used in a regional energy grid are going to be completely different from the SWIFT protocols used in the global financial sector.
Exactly. It has to know what normal looks like for a high-frequency trading platform versus what normal looks like for a water treatment facility.
And that contextual awareness is what Deloitte is spending massive resources building right now.
Yeah, because think about it. If an agentic AI is monitoring an energy grid and it sees a sudden, strange spike in data requests at a remote substation, it has to instantly weigh the operational risk.
Right, like does it sever the connection and risk causing a localized blackout? Or does it reroute the traffic to a honeypot to study the attacker's behavior?
And it makes that call based on deep, sector-specific training data.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Because putting an AI, a software program, in the driver's seat to make executive real-time security decisions, that sounds like a massive new vulnerability.
It is definitely a huge concern.
Yeah, because if you give an AI the power to actively shut down servers or sever network connections, aren't you just handing a master key directly to the attackers? What happens if the defense AI itself gets poisoned or manipulated into attacking its own network?
And that is the exact tension the entire industry is trying to navigate right now. Giving software the power to execute changes on a live production network introduces a profound level of risk.
I can imagine.
Which is why organizations refuse to just roll these agents out broadly. They are subjected to brutal adversarial testing.
So how does Deloitte handle that testing?
They run extensive proofs of concept, or POCs, in highly specific, isolated use cases before any wider deployment is even considered. You sandbox the AI.
Ah, so you let it monitor traffic and recommend actions without actually giving it the keys to execute them.
Exactly. And then you measure its accuracy against human analysts for months. It is a slow, methodical process of earning trust. You are constantly balancing the desperate need for machine speed against the catastrophic risk of a runaway defense agent.
Makes sense. So the technology is advancing at breakneck speed, creating these incredibly complex risk profiles. And naturally, when things move this fast and the stakes involve critical national infrastructure, regulators are going to step in.
Oh, absolutely. The European Union has introduced a massive wave of new directives.
Right, we're looking at DORA, which focuses on digital operational resilience for the financial sector, and the NIS directive. But the one that really stands out in these notes is the CRA, the Cyber Resilience Act.
The CRA is a game changer.
I was looking at the CRA mandate, and it is sweeping. It basically dictates that every single internet-connected device in the European Union, from a hospital heart monitor to just basic software components, has to be secure by design.
The scope of the CRA fundamentally rewrites how products are brought to market. Historically, companies would build a software product, prioritize speed and functionality, and then slap a security patch on it right before launch.
Or sometimes even after it was already in the hands of consumers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the CRA makes that illegal. Security must be demonstrable in the foundational architecture itself.
Now, usually when companies hear about a sweeping EU regulation, they brace for endless paperwork, compliance headaches, and massive operational slowdowns.
That's the typical reaction, yeah.
But the notes from Chavi Gracia suggest the market leaders are actually treating the CRA and DORA as competitive advantages. How does being forced to redesign your product architecture translate into a business win?
Well, it forces the elimination of technical debt. The companies that struggle are the ones treating compliance as just a chore, simply trying to check the regulatory boxes with the bare minimum effort.
Right.
But the leaders recognize that you cannot deploy advanced features, and you certainly cannot deploy AI effectively on top of a fragile, insecure legacy architecture.
So building secure by design infrastructure actually streamlines future cloud deployments.
Exactly. It means fewer catastrophic bugs down the line. It actually accelerates long-term time to market.
It's kind of like being forced to upgrade the foundation of a house to meet new, incredibly strict earthquake codes.
Yeah.
It's a massive pain, it's expensive, and it slows down your initial build.
Yeah, nobody wants to do it at first.
But once that foundation is set, you can safely build a skyscraper on top of it. Whereas your competitors who just patch their old foundations, well, they're stuck building two-story houses. They literally can't scale without collapsing.
That structural integrity becomes your primary asset. And it is vital because of a threat vector that completely dominated 2025 and remains the biggest headache today.
Which is third-party risk.
Yes, we have seen massive, highly secure global corporations suffer severe data breaches, and their internal firewalls never even failed.
So how did the breach happen?
It happened because a single tiny provider out of their massive supply chain, perhaps, an HR vendor that handles basic administrative tasks, failed to secure their systems.
Wow.
The attacker walks right through the vendor's side door into the main corporate network.
So for everyone listening, think about your own company, right? You don't just have one or two vendors. You probably have dozens. Or if you're a major corporation, you might have 5,000 different suppliers.
Easily.
You have marketing agencies, cloud storage providers, legal counsel, payroll processors. How on earth do you monitor the internal security posture of 5,000 separate companies? You can't just send them a questionnaire once a year and take their word for it.
You really can't. You have to extend your cyber resilience beyond your own perimeter. And this is where those regulations like DORA actually help, because they force financial institutions to legally bind their third-party ICT providers to strict security standards.
But operationally, monitoring 5,000 vendors, that requires automated AI tools, doesn't it? Tools that continuously scan the external attack surface of your entire supply chain.
Exactly. You are actively looking for leaked credentials or unpatched servers belonging to your partners. You are only as secure as the weakest link in your extended network.
Well, you mentioned those 5,000 vendors, and that makes the next piece of this deeply daunting. Because the encryption standards we are forcing on those vendors today, the math that keeps all their data and our data scrambled and safe, they're about to have an expiration date.
We are looking down the barrel of quantum computing.
Yeah, the convergence of quantum computing and artificial intelligence is accelerating much faster than the broader public realizes, isn't it?
Much faster.
Che.
We are currently in what Chavi Gracia describes as a crucial discovery phase. The immediate existential threat is to cryptography.
The algorithms we use today to secure banking transactions, classified communications, and all those 5,000 supply chain connections, they're based on mathematical problems that take classical computers millions of years to solve.
But a mature quantum computer solves them in minutes.
Which is terrifying.
Precisely why the discovery phase is happening right now. Companies are mapping their entire digital infrastructure to find every single instance where these vulnerable cryptographic standards are buried in their legacy code.
It's almost like an archaeological dig through decades of software to identify what will easily be decrypted tomorrow.
Yeah, so they can begin migrating to post-quantum cryptography today, long before quantum hardware becomes mainstream.
But running a massive cryptographic discovery phase while actively defending against agentic AI and auditing thousands of vendors, it requires an unimaginable scale. You can't do this with a small elite team anymore.
You really can't. You need a standing army.
And looking at the numbers from Deloitte Spain, they have quite literally built one. They have 1,700 cybersecurity professionals.
And the concentration of talent is what makes it so effective. Out of those 1,700 professionals, 800 are dedicated to the International European Cyber Center, located in Madrid.
Wow, 800 just in the Madrid hub.
Yeah, and that single center is serving the entire EMEA region, Japan, Australia, and heavily supporting operations in the U.S., And then you have another 900 professionals dedicated entirely to the Spanish domestic market.
Which creates a really fascinating dynamic within Deloitte's global network. I mean, they have roughly 500,000 employees worldwide, with the U.S. firm making up about 40 to 45% of that total.
Right.
So naturally, the U.S. firm sets a lot of the broad strategic global trends, but Madrid has become the absolute gold standard for implementation.
They are the ones in the trenches, running the European Cyber Center, dealing with the daily friction of making these complex systems work across massive multinational clients.
And a major reason Madrid can sustain that level of operational execution is their homegrown talent pipeline, right?
Absolutely. They aren't just trying to poach senior talent from competitors. They aggressively utilize their own cyber academy to train professionals from the ground up.
Which makes sense. In an industry facing a severe global talent shortage, building your own pipeline is really the only sustainable way to maintain a force of 1,700 people.
And that trench warfare mentality that focus on actual practical implementation brings us right to the core of the Cyber Icon 2026 event.
Yeah, looking at the agenda, this isn't just a theoretical talking shop. European leaders are gathering in Madrid to execute actionable proofs of concept on the spot.
They're putting global tech vendors in the exact same room with local innovators to test real, live solutions against current threat models.
It really reflects the fundamental reality of the industry, doesn't it? Isolation basically equals vulnerability.
Completely. The threats posed by nation-state actors and AI-powered syndicates are just too large, and the adversaries are too well-resourced for any single corporation to fight alone.
Collaboration is no longer a buzzword. It's a baseline survival tactic.
It has to be.
I was looking at the attendee list dynamics for these types of events, and it's remarkable. You have chief information security officers from rival Tier 1 banks sitting across a table from each other, openly sharing their incident reports and defense blueprints.
Which is unheard of in almost any other sector.
Right. These are fierce competitors fighting for market share in every other vertical. You don't see Coca-Cola and Pepsi collaborating on supply chain efficiency. But in cyber, these financial institutions actively team up and share threat intelligence for the greater good of the community.
Because they recognize that if one bank falls to a systemic vulnerability, confidence in the entire financial sector takes a hit.
Yeah, that shared reality forces a level of transparency you rarely see in the corporate world. They're pooling their data to train better defense models, effectively crowdsourcing their resilience.
It's the only way to keep up.
So we've mapped out a pretty intense battlefield today. We started by tearing down the medieval castle walls and embracing the submarine model of cyber resilience, accepting that the breach is inevitable.
Yeah, shifting from perimeter defense to internal resilience.
And we examined how the sheer speed of AI exploits, that shrinking 1-hour window, is forcing us to hand operational control over to agentic AI. We're trusting software to act as real-time security managers based on deep, contextual training.
We also unpacked how sweeping mandates, like the European Cyber Resilience Act, are forcing companies to build secure-by-design architectures.
Right, and we saw how the smartest organizations are using that forced rebuild to eliminate technical debt and outpace competitors, especially when trying to secure those massive, vulnerable supply chains we talked about.
And then, of course, we looked over the horizon at the looming quantum decryption threat and the massive collaborative standing armies required to face it, spearheaded by hubs like the one in Madrid.
It's an incredibly complex technological landscape, but there is one final detail from the Cyber Icon 2026 agenda that really reframes everything we've just discussed.
Oh, the closing keynote.
Yes. After days of heavy sessions on post-quantum encryption, agentic AI architectures, automated compliance, the closing keynote of the entire event isn't about technology at all.
It's not.
It's a keynote focused entirely on the power of the mind.
Because despite the billions of dollars poured into automated SOCs and secure by design infrastructure, the vast majority of successful, devastating cyber attacks still rely on social engineering.
Wow, so they just bypass the technology entirely and focus on psychological manipulation.
It's the deepfake voice call that mimics your boss perfectly, conveying an intense sense of urgency. Or it's the highly personalized phishing message that references a project you're actively working on.
The hacker doesn't need to break your quantum encryption or outmaneuver your agentic AI if they can just trick an employee into voluntarily handing over their credentials.
Exactly. It highlights a profound, really unchanging truth about cybersecurity. The technological tools, the attack algorithms, the encryption models, the defense agents, they will constantly evolve.
But human psychology remains relatively static.
We are biologically wired to trust authority, to be helpful to our colleagues, and to react quickly to urgent situations.
And attackers understand that the human interface is the only part of the network that hasn't received a fundamental upgrade in thousands of years.
It is the ultimate backdoor.
Which brings us right back to that image we started with. The tireless, unregulated adversary with infinite time. We can deploy the most advanced, context-aware AI to hunt their malicious code across an energy grid.
We can meticulously prepare our legacy data for a post-quantum reality.
We can build our digital submarines with 1,000 watertight compartments and audit every single one of our 5,000 vendors. But looking at all of this, it leaves you with a final thought to ponder.
What's that?
As the technology on both sides approaches near perfection, is it possible that the ultimate vulnerability in any system will never be the code, but will always be the human mind?
That is the ultimate question the industry has to answer.
It really is. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, stay secure, and we'll see you next time.